great to be here. It is great to be in a room of very sophisticated data science and ML people because the story of our company's turnaround over the last couple of years has really been driven by data science and ML, and so I'll share a little bit of that, but I look forward to the panel afterwards with a lot of distinguished folks and your questions. So let me just share a little bit about what it means to be a location intelligence company. I think to build an interesting data-driven business, you need a couple of things. You need a unique data set, you need something that's valuable, and you need great technology. So you need some combination of that. So a lot of you probably might know Foursquare early on from having invented the check-in and the mayorships and all of that, and it turned out that this was a very unique data set to map the world in a crowdsourced way. I'll talk about some of the ways that the company has turned that into an interesting business. But you probably don't know what Foursquare, a lot of you probably don't know what Foursquare actually is up to now. So I'll start with the data set. So we have about 50 million people who use the Foursquare and City Guide and the Swarm, for the Foursquare Swarm location-based game around the world each month across websites and our apps. And you know, they're wonderful apps, and the community is thriving. We do more check-ins each day than ever in the history of the company, and that surprises folks, but we've become very, very global. And so you have this wonderful city guide that, for those of you who haven't tried it lately, it is particularly amazing when you travel, and it'll learn your tastes, and it'll guide you to amazing places. And then for those of you who want to log where you go in the world so you can remember that amazing banh mi sandwich that you had, or that incredible tapas place you tried in Barcelona, Swarm is a way to log all the places you go and remember everywhere and pull it up, but in a gamified sort of way. So these two apps are the foundation of a very interesting data set that maps the world with a crowdsourced approach akin to a Waze, or a Wikipedia. But what you probably don't know is that the technology that we developed to build the City Guide and Swarm is now powering a lot of the location solutions in much bigger enterprises. So, we power a lot of the location inside Bing. We power a lot of Apple Maps around the world. If you search in Uber or Tencent, Pinterest, and Snapchat, Samsung, Twitter, Garmin, these are among the 100,000 companies that now are using this technology set to make their own applications. And I'll give you a couple examples. So, Snapchat faced an interesting problem, which is they wanted geo-filters. For those of you who've tried out Snapchat, you're constantly snapping and you're adding a filter. Well, they wanted to be able to do things like, hey, I want an advertiser to, let's say Nike comes and they want to put a new shoe filter, and they want, let's say, I want to put this geo-filter over in 42 countries, every independent gym, and I want to put it over every independent coffee house, and I want to put it over every independent cinema in 42 countries. That was a really hard problem for Snapchat, but we said, we can help you map out 100 million places in the world, and for us, it's a 30-second problem to do what you just said and show when you're inside those businesses the right ad or the right geo-filter for this restaurant, this small restaurant in LA. Twitter runs on our hosted platform, which does about 1 billion API calls a day. And if anyone in the world wants to tag a tweet with the location where they're standing, that uses all of our machine learning to understand where the phone is and tag the tweet appropriately so the user doesn't have to type where they are. We kind of know where they are, and that's all on our hosted platform. As well as if you pin anything in Pinterest any place in the world, that's our technology. Samsung, every Samsung phone, tags all of the photos to build albums based on location automatically using our algorithms. Every photo on the Samsung Galaxy phones are geotagged through our API set to build these rich albums. If you use Uber and you say please pick me up at the Regency Cinema in Tribeca and take me to the Starbucks on 27th Street rather than typing addresses, that's all powered by Foursquare's global data set. And they moved off Google Maps to use our sort of fresher set. And not only are we fresher and better, but more importantly, we're not Google. Google's not their friend. Apple Apple had a few problems with their map rollout, as you may have heard. And so, they came to us to try to improve the map data set around the world outside the US. So those are just a handful of the 100,000 companies using the technology set to build better mobile apps. And it all starts back from that crowdsourced foundation of knowing where every business and every interesting place in the world is and the shape of those businesses, which I will come to. So, we're actually getting near 11 billion check-ins, mapping 105 million venues, all mapped by 50 million people around the world, and doing over 1 billion API calls a day. So how does the machine learning kind of work off the data set? So this is a kind of data visualization. So this is the Mall of America, a very large, easy to see thing from the sky. And this is a week of check-ins. Each of these dots, each of these white entities is someone checking in. And so it's very easy for us to map that mall. That's an easy problem. What's hard is, can you find the J. Crew on the 3rd floor of the Mall of America? And that's what our users are mapping here. And you'll see these concentric probability circles. And so over time, you build a data set over billions of check-ins. You know the shape of every place, and you know the 95% confidence interval in terms of lat long where someone is. This is the Starbucks. And the pink ones are people who get their latte and walk down the street. But over time, over a large enough data set, you get a really kind of cone of truth. The density in the blue there is this small area where we have an over 95% confidence that you are at that damn Starbucks inside the mall. And it's a machine learning algorithm with a backtest data set, right? So you're constantly taking tons of data and testing whether we're able to predict correctly where people say they are. And it's very messy, and but you need a truth set to test the machine learning against, since we have a team of data scientists working on that stuff. So the beauty of that is that the technology has gotten to the point where you don't need to take your phone out. So anyone running our technology who's opted into our sort of research panel, in effect, by using the apps and leaving location on, we understand when phones move in and out of 105 million businesses passively. We understand the dwell time because we recognize the digital signature, and it's not just lat long. It's cosine similarity to the 14 different Wi-Fi connection points and their triangulation strength that differ on the 3rd floor of the Mall of America from the 1st floor. And they're different at the disco in the basement and the yoga studio on the 2nd floor. And we had to train this. People always ask about being a technology company that's made in New York City. This was a lot harder data science problem doing it in New York City than it would be in Palo Alto, where I used to work, because Palo Alto, everything's a single-story building. Mayor Bloomberg used to laugh about the only thing to do in Sunnyvale was the Pizza Hut on Friday night. So, but when you're on Mulberry Street trying to distinguish Ruba Rosa from the gray dog, you need to be really damn good. And so you need to build really sophisticated machine learning models to tease those differences out. And so now we can identify when phones passively move in and out of 105 million businesses. Now, is this a valuable data set? Well, it so happens that 92% of all consumer spending in the United States happens in the physical world. So if someone said to us, so if you know where all the people are going and what they're going to do when they get there, and you can't fucking make money off that, you're an idiot. So one of the ways that we started to work with sophisticated consumers of data who want to understand how consumer trends are changing, which businesses are up or down in the physical economy through foot traffic trends, is starting to predict some ticker earnings based on foot traffic signals. So one of the examples, and I'm trying to be very brief here because we have a great panel, but one of the examples was we went on CNBC a couple weeks before Chipotle's Q1 earnings, and I said, in 2 weeks they're going to report their earnings, and you're going to see same-store sales down 30% in the United States post the E. coli scare. And they were like, why should we trust you? And then 2 weeks later, Chipotle reported their number, and it was 29.7. So we were just a little off. So you can see the power of understanding, in businesses that are driven by, if consumers aren't coming in the door, you're not making money, how that analytics can be powerful. And we called how many phones Apple would sell from looking at their global Apple store. We called Q4 strong for McDonald's because We saw people responding to all-day breakfast after 3 years of declining same-store sales. You know, we predicted that retail shopping Black Friday weekend would be down 3.5%, watching store traffic in the 6 weeks leading up to Black Friday last year. NRF came out after the weekend, said it was down 3.7%. And that was actually an improvement. That was stabilizing the sector. So we have a pretty good track record of using these data sets, and we're learning. We're still early, learning when to trust the predictions and when not to, and that's part of the game. But we're on this journey, and it's been a lot of fun. And the business has been growing like crazy, which is fun to see. So I'm going to wrap up here. But like, if you think about what it means to be a data-driven company, and in our vertical, it's about location intelligence. There's all these interesting applications once you understand you have this unique data set. For us, you know, it's planning insights. It's marketing to the right people. About 50 of the top 100 ad age advertisers are already using our marketing solutions because, you know, if you're Burger King and you want to figure out who's going to McDonald's, we happen to know that across 150 million profiles in the United States alone through partnerships that allow us to take our passive understanding of these places and understand where the whole population is going. It's Foursquare analytics, it's the kind of foot traffic analytics that we talked about, and then it's technology solutions like the ones that Uber and Samsung are doing. And it all comes back to having a unique data set and a team of data scientists doing really interesting ML work. And so it's really been core to us revitalizing the business over the last 2 years, and it's been fun as CEO for a year and about 2 years at the company to see what you can do. And as someone who's been both a CEO in Silicon Valley and here, I really feel like people are rooting for Foursquare because it's a company that had early buzz, made in New York, it lost its way briefly, and I think it's really important to the New York tech ecosystem that we make something great of Foursquare. It's always punched above its weight, and I think it's an example that a lot of folks are rooting for. So I look forward to the panel and your questions, but that's just a teaser on some of the topics we might discuss around what you called alternative data. So thanks, Matt.
You know, thank you so much. Actually, why don't you join me just like for a few minutes, and then we'll jump into the panel. But you know, if people have questions specifically for you on aspects of Foursquare that are not related to alternative data, maybe I'll start. So you build this business. What is it called? Place Insight.
Yes.
Okay. This one
foot traffic panel piece.
Foot traffic. Okay.
Yeah.
Just tell us maybe how you productize the data, how you turn this massive amounts of data that you had into something that you could sell, and then in the panel we'll talk about who you sell it to. But what was involved in the process of building that data product?
Yeah, you know, it's been an evolution. So we started out with very sophisticated customers who might want data sets and actually providing them nightly data sets. But there's very few people who can consume it at that level and have teams of data scientists. And everything's anonymous and aggregated, to be very clear, but sort of anonymized and aggregated data sets. I'm happy to talk about privacy. We're religious about that. But we started building sort of dashboards that analysts at companies can use. And you know, the targets are not just like hedge funds, which I know we'll talk a little bit about today, but also every retailer, you know, and every CPG company that wants to understand what's happening to retail. It's QSR, it's auto, it's entertainment, it's any business that's driven by physical store traffic, and understanding, you know, what's your share. And it's not just where people are going, it's who's going where. So we understand, you know, your Macy's, what happens when you close a store? Who's gaining market share? How far are people willing to travel? We understand the home and work address of every consumer in the panel. We understand their demographics. So we can say, you're getting crushed among women in the Midwest, you know, 20 to 35. And we can sort of analyze how far people, when you close a store, are willing to travel to your next store and all these things. So it's a very powerful sort of portal that we've built for sort of Fortune 500 brands and analysts. But I think we're just getting started, and we'll save where else it could go for some of the panel discussion.
Great. Do we have any specific questions?
Hi, thank you. So I really enjoyed your talk. You mentioned before that you have only 50%, I guess, of the Fortune, the top 100 advertisers. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's an uphill battle for you, or if it's something you just like, you walk in and like drop the mic. how excited do you get when you get to like pitch this idea of we can predict who's on which floor of which mall at which time for which meal, or which
Yeah.
whatever's going on. Like it seems like an exciting data set. It seems like you shouldn't have to sell it.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
mean, well, the advertising product, Pinpoint, and now our new measurement, Attribution by Foursquare, are only a year and a half old. And, we grew it at 120% last year. So it's not hard to sell because this kind of rich data is what marketers are looking for. But what is a little tricky is, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the ad tech space, right? And so we have to get out and tell the story. We're really sort of trying to be the gold standard in very high quality and very high accuracy. And it's an industry in the advertising side where there's a lot of ad tech companies don't have proprietary data sets, and they just hire someone, in the Philippines to draw the outlines off satellite maps, and then they draw a big circle around, every J. Crew, 200 meters wide, and then if you're driving by, because they don't have on-device sensors to know if you've actually stopped, and you get an ad call inside that, huge circle around that business, you're a J. Crew shopper, and there's just a lot of junk out there. So that's sort of the uphill battle, is sort of getting marketers to appreciate the gold standard stuff. But we are, it's working well.
Yes, hi, thank you. In your example of Chipotle, how much more accurate were you than, say, Wall Street's analysts 2 weeks prior to them releasing their sales? In other words, you said down 30. What was the consensus a month before? How much better were you than what was out there?
Yeah, I mean, Chipotle had some data out there, so they knew there would be pretty harsh same-store sales declines. I think the Wall Street, I don't remember the exact number, but we were at least 100 basis points or 200 basis points higher in fall-off than the consensus on same-store sales. Like, I remember back to the time when we predicted Apple the first weekend of sales for the iPhone 6s, and at the time, Wall Street consensus was around 11 to 12 million units the first weekend, and we said it would be 13 to 14, and they came out over 13. So we beat the Wall Street analysts in that case. Same with McDonald's. We predicted higher lift for McDonald's in Q4 than it came out. But look, the analysts are very smart. They have a lot of credit card panels. We understand there's sophisticated mosaic investors out there. I think this is a complement to a lot of smart data out there to just make the models better if you're a financial analyst on long shorts. If you have a bunch of the biggest quant and long short funds using the data sets and learning how to use them, but it's into a mosaic of smart people who have lots of different signal. But foot traffic is a particularly interesting signal because it's about why is the credit card panel down? And we're able to really understand on a nightly basis what's going on by demographics, by region, by store location, and all of that, which a lot of other folks are not able to open up the kind of what's going on inside the credit card data.
Thanks. One or two more, and then we'll move to the panel.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned satellite data. So to what degree, can you tell us a little bit more about how your data can be partnered or combined with satellite data? And are you working regularly with one or two particular satellite firms? And if so, which ones?
So, yeah, obviously I think in some ways satellite data would have been how people tried to solve some of this problem before you had this kind of very rich, location. There's a lot of limitations in satellite data, although there's some really some interesting strengths for the logistics and supply chain side. But satellite data is usually one pass, whereas we're seeing 24 hours of the day. Satellite data can't see anything if it's cloudy, or we don't have that problem. Satellite data usually doesn't tell you who is going and how long their dwell time is and how far from home and work they are, and all these interesting kind of questions that you can use for real estate applications or investing. And so, we're very open. A lot of our sophisticated hedge fund customers are obviously buying lots of interesting data sets and trying to combine them and get lift signal from the noise. So, That might be a good question to ask some of the consumers of alternative data on the panel. I would say.
Wait, one last question.
Great presentation. Do you plan to offer pro bono services to the Democratic Party?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. We did a story that got a lot of coverage last year. If you may or may not have seen, it was an interesting data science question about what happened during the campaign to businesses with the Trump brand on them. And you can look it up on Medium. You can Google it. We had hundreds of people run the story. But basically, it turned out that, not surprisingly, we live in a polarized country. And it was interesting. There are more Trump branded. We looked at all the golf courses and hotels and other businesses that have the Trump name on them, and we looked at foot traffic. And what's interesting is during the peak of the campaign, women's foot traffic in blue states to Trump branded properties was down 29% year over year. So people were responding, but in red states it was fairly flat. And now the bad thing for Trump's business was that there are more of his properties and more of his consumers are in blue states. But I guess, obviously the Electoral College doesn't work that way. So I think, so I mean, it's an interesting question. As a company, we are not political. We provide data. And so we did have, I wish that all the campaigns had used the data more. The Sanders campaign used the data in Michigan, which was the primary that they won, to sort of figure out likely voters. And so we know who goes to colleges. We know, which phones go to yoga studios and buy Subarus, and so we were able to help them think about where their audience might be and stuff like that. But, campaigns for the most part still buy TV, especially on the Dem side. So I think, hopefully in the next cycle, there'll be a lot more use of this kind of advanced digital location intelligence.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right.